bensound.com.
Hello and welcome to Corn on the Call, the podcast home for your normal Corn Belters. Thank you to Blow No Pizza Co. for hosting this podcast at their location in Normal, Illinois.
On today's episode, we'll be able to go more in depth as to how the season's going for the Corn Belters so far. There's just plenty of stuff to be able to go over right now, so we'll have plenty to talk about. I'm Braden Fogerson alongside Blake Borgart. Because of car troubles, there's sadly no Megan today.
It's a shame. It definitely is a shame, especially. But we'll make it work. So to get us going, I wanted to start talking about the weekend that the Belters had. They had some key players join them on the roster, arriving from Creighton University that I figured we could talk about, and just some of the outcomes of the games that happened, because we had an interesting competition with the Pistol Shrimps where the Belters faced their first shutout of the year, and then they came right back against the Quincy Gems and completely opened up their offense.
Yeah, Hogan Halixa was one. He was able to come in at catcher. I know the offensive side of things, he hasn't really been able to show himself yet, but he certainly held himself on the defensive end when he was able to make appearances there. And, it's early in the season, so I think the offense will come for him.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the same thing is going to happen for Nolan Sailors. I mean, he's batting 167 right now with 2 RBIs and 2 total runs scored. He's made his second start, I believe it was. He's only had 4 games played up to this point, I'd like to point out, underneath his belt. And he made his second start at shortstop against the Pistol Shrimp, where I felt that he needed to tune up a little bit of his defensive skills out there at shortstop, because he had 2 very... I would describe them as textbook plays where he was attempting to throw out a runner over at first, where he fielded it over at shortstop, and he was just over the head or just short of where Cy Kerber was over on first base. And I think that will come, as we get deeper into the season and he's getting tuned up. His last game that he played was on the 28th against Xavier when they were in their tournament. So, he's taken a couple of weeks off to rest, and now he's got to sort of warm that arm back up. And so I'm expecting a little bit of growing pains like that to sort of come through. But really, I'm excited to see what this infield is going to do with guys like Xavier Watson, Jackson Chatterton, Nolan Sailors, Will Henson, Cy Kerber. I mean, you can just keep going on and on and on with all these guys. Kyle Bartman, too. Completely forgot to mention him. That's just how deep this infield is for this Belters team. Not just on the defensive side, but on the offensive end as well.
Yeah, the infield is really deep, as you said. You were talking about it, how there's been some growing pains there at shortstop. Really, this whole infield, it seemed the very first week we had a good idea of what the infield was going to be, and then there's been a lot of shifts, a lot of changes to the way that the lineup looks all the time, and so there's been a lot of people in different positions in the infield, and to the average eye you might think, well, what's the difference between throwing from shortstop and throwing from third? There is a big difference for some of these people, some of these players, and it's a big adjustment. And to this point, we still don't have set positions for any of these infielders anymore, because it's been shifted around so much. We couldn't really tell you what position anyone is anymore.
Yeah.
Once we get to the point where the Corn Belters finally feel like they're comfortable with each person's position in a general lineup, barring injuries or just fatigue for certain players, if we get an idea of what position the Corn Belters staff wants their players to be hitting at, in the order, and what position they want them to be fielding from, I think that's when they'll be able to settle in and finally, no longer struggle with the defensive woes.
Well, I like that you bring up sort of like how this team has been like altered consistently, and I think we'll definitely keep on seeing that throughout the season. It is a developmental league, and it is about getting these guys, a lot of different experience at different positions. But one guy who I've seen who has like consistently been in the lineup at this position throughout the entire season has been Will Henson. He's really made his home over at second base, and he's one of these guys that I've really grown to really enjoy watching. There was one play that I remember back in the Pistol Shrimps game where there was Jack Johnston, the shortstop for the Pistol Shrimp. He was making his way over to steal second, and it was like Henson, I assume, he's a very, very smart baseball player, but Henson, as soon as he saw that first step by Johnston, he was immediately making his way over to the bag, and as soon as the pitch reached Peyton Meredith, excellent throw by Peyton Meredith, by the way. I mean, he could not have put it in a better spot. He put it on the back shoulder of Henson in order to tag Johnston out. Henson just made the snag and immediately turned around and was able to tag Johnston out. And I think that that's just sort of one of the one of the many plays that I've seen from him where, like, he has proven himself that is going to be his position on this roster, and I don't really think it's open to debate, and I don't really think the coaches will sort of move around him in the lineup all that much.
Yeah, no, he's definitely found a spot there, and the more often we can find players that definitely have their set spot, the better off this Corn Belters team will look. And players like him are certainly good to have on the roster as well. But this infield has done a really good job. Whomever we've had at first, and there's been a plethora of different players that we've seen over there, certain catchers as well that have been able to easily make the shift from catcher to first, because that's typically what catchers do. When there have been some errant throws, a lot of times the Corn Belters have had good first basemen over there that have been able to make adjustments and have the awareness to try and move yourself over and try and get yourself a better chance to make a play on the ball if a ball's a little bit errant on the throw. But second base and first base is looking good for the Corn Belters. It's just that there's a lot of pull hitting righties, and when that's the case, a lot of ground balls are going to get hit the shortstop and third, until we can get a solidified set of players that play at those two positions and can get comfortable in those spots, which we don't know exactly how long this will take.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to be waiting on to avoid those errors anymore. But the other teams have had problems just the same as the Corn Belters. It's not like the Corn Belters are the only team in the Prospect League that are having troubles getting people into solidified spots in their field. It's all around this whole league.
So question for you really quickly. I'm curious from your perspective, as you've seen just about as many Corn Belters games as I have up to this point, and I assume as many as most of the viewers. From the standpoint of talking about third and shortstop, we've seen so many different combinations of guys around there. You've seen Xavier Watson and Jackson Chatterton sort of being moved in and out interchangeably between third and short, and a mix of other guys. I'm curious, is there a lineup that you would feel most comfortable with rolling out from a defensive perspective at those two positions, and with what these guys have shown you up to this point?
Well, I'm going to try not to show bias because I've already talked about Xavier Watson a lot, but he has shown to be a very good third baseman, and this past week he also was able to get finally a good hitting game under his belt as well. If he can continue that offensive effort and those offensive performances, then he can get himself back into a solidified third base position. And from there, whomever's at short, I'm still not entirely sure who we want over there yet. Chatterton's, typically a second baseman, but since we're saying that, he's not the solidified second baseman anymore, he's going to probably be getting used to shortstop quite a bit. And I don't know how well or poorly he's been adjusting to it. I don't think he's really struggled all that much. So I would say probably Chatterton and Xavier Watson over there, as well as just Will Henson and the first baseman by committee that the Corn Belters have had working.
I've been really enjoying seeing Cy Kerber play out there at first base and just seeing him continue to ride in the lineup. I love his play style. He's definitely got a little bit of a power hitter mentality to him.
Prototypical first baseman. For sure, yeah.
Exactly. So what I wanted to sort of alternate to really quickly was sort of talking about where do these new players that we have just received, Helixo and Sailors, fit into the lineup? Because I feel like what the Belters are going through right now is a bit of an embarrassment of riches, if you will. There are so many different guys that they have that can play that infield position and rotate out towards the outfield. How do you decide on a lineup to roll out every single game?
Well, it's up to the manager. Who the people in charge of running this team and setting the lineup cards every day, they know these players. There's a lot of players that will come from the colleges that those coaches are from, and then they'll know those players as well. They're obviously not going to try and be slighted towards them. They're going to try and give everyone a shot if they can at least, give effort and perform well. But the players that you know and trust to be in certain spots in the lineup that have proven themselves to do well in those situations, middle of the order guys, this offense has been really good this year. The middle of the order guys that they've had right now have been pretty consistently able to prove that they can perform well in the clutch and get at bats and get rallies going if you want. Chatterton has been fantastic as a leadoff hitter, even in games where, aside from him, the offense is struggling. He can get rallies going and really rally on the rest of the team to get their offensive efforts going, and that's led to some wins as well. So players like them that know what spot they belong in and know that they perform well in those spots, those are the players that are going to be in the lineup every day in those spots, and that's how you make the decision. It's also how you make a decision for a pitching staff moving over to that. The pitching we have certain guys that have, Luke Olson's been a really good starter, and he's been able to eat innings quite a bit. We've seen that, there's quite a few players. Jake Armstrong, who I love to be able to watch. He's been good both from a long relief role and a starting role. Players like that have solidified themselves in the rotation, as well as players that have done a good job of being late relievers and things like that. Spencer Smith has been really good. Those are the players that we know where they go, and now we know that they can be in those spots, and the manager can trust that if they can't get out of this spot, then no one can.
So I like that we sort of transitioned to talking about pitching, because that was the next point that I wanted to bring up for the Belters. Their batting average against is the lowest in all of the prospect league. It's .213 up to this point, which is extremely impressive. And it's something that I think is so crazy to me is how, coming off of that game against the Quincy Gems, that the final score is 14-10. That's a football score. That is absolutely not a score that you're used to seeing in baseball, where both teams are getting into the double digits and scoring 24 runs combined. It was a super fun game to end up watching. But I just wanted to talk about, how the Belters really have, not only on the offensive end, are slowly starting to develop there, but on the pitching end, it's sort of been done by committee up to this point with such an incredibly deep bullpen and starting rotation.
Yeah, there's all sorts of deep pitch lineups on in the prospect league. You have a lot of roster spots. You're not limited to the point where you're like, oh man, I'm just out of certain pitchers. Even in a league where sometimes you're playing 4 or 5 games in a row, if you're in a situation like that and you have this roster, you still have plenty of pitchers to go with. They've been more than fine with it, and all the situations that they've been put into and thrust into, they've been able to make adjustments when they've had to. They've been able to figure things out. You talked about the high-scoring game earlier, and we talked about it before we started on the podcast, trying to decipher, why is it that even with a rough game like that, as far as limiting hits and limiting runs were concerned, they're still at the top of the league. Everyone in this league has had a game like that by now, and it all evens out. But throughout the season so far, the most consistent in games, aside from that last game, has definitely been the Corn Belters. They've done a good job of limiting hits, making hits hard to come by. And when you're a hitter out there, and it's just that much harder to be able to go up there and tell yourself you're going to get a hit, when you're going up against pitchers that are just rolling and feeling good and throwing strikes and not afraid to continue to do so, and even the players that have quite a bit of velocity as well that can just blow you away, you're in good shape when you're in that spot. And so the Corn Belters have done a very fantastic job of that, and that's why they're sitting here at the top of the league still.
So something that I thought was incredibly interesting when I was taking a look at the box score for the Gems was when I was going through the pitchers, I saw Peyton Meredith's name sneak into the one of these 6 pitchers that he had. He had no hits, no runs allowed, and he had 2 strikeouts. So I just thought that was incredibly interesting that he had that versatility to not only play an incredible role at catcher, but also be able to get up there on the mound and throw some strikeouts. And every time I see him make a throw over to second, I don't know what it's been going on in my head, but I'm always like, that guy is way too accurate to just be a catcher.
Yeah.
He's out there throwing lasers over from the catcher's position straight to the second baseman like it's nothing. So I guess I have an answer now as to that. And he did pitch a couple innings over at St. Leo University this past year. He only had... let me take a look really quickly as to what he had.
While you take a look at it, I would just say that certain players have that ability to, I don't know if I would say charm the manager or something, but you've got to be able to convince your manager, hey, if you need an inning out of me, I will be up there, I'll be ready to throw and ready to go. And he did a good job of convincing the management there, and that's why he found himself on the mound. He threw an inning, as you said, no runs and a couple strikeouts as well. He looked really good out there. So he's been able to prove himself both in the college level and also at the prospect league level.
So something I will say is, pardon me, it is not actually Peyton Meredith. It's Peyton Petrie for St. Leo University who have been doing the pitching. Yeah. I saw the name Peyton. I was like, oh, Peyton Meredith, cool. I didn't realize there was another Peyton on the team, but I just thought that was incredibly interesting that, the guy has the ability to have an incredible performance at catcher and then just immediately transition over towards the mound.
And considering now we find out that he hasn't pitched in college before then, he really must have convinced the manager that he didn't have like some previous performance to go off of. I know that I remember there was I think it might have been a College World Series game a few years ago. There was a pitcher that like came out and like he was like a pinch hitter. He wasn't pitching that day, and the manager said like, "Have you ever hit in high school?" And he said, "Yo, I hit." What did he say? I hit dingers or something like that?
Yeah, he said, "Coach, I hit dingers."
He hit a home run, but then we found out after the game he never actually hit. He didn't do it. So.
I love that you brought that up because as soon as you said that, I had it pulled up on my computer. I was literally going to mention him. His name is Todd Peterson. He used to play for LSU, and he admitted to his coach in the press conference after hitting a walk-off home run?
Yeah, something like that.
A walk-off home run that he had never actually hit in high school up to that point.
Todd, when's the last time you've had an at-bat in a competitive baseball game?
High school, I guess. Coach, I'll be honest, I didn't hit in high school. My coach didn't let me. I hit BP a couple times. I did hit nukes, I'll tell you that. But yeah.
You didn't even hit in the games in high school?
No. He wouldn't let me. He didn't want me to get hurt, but I guess it paid off.
So you like?
You got to take advantage of moments like that, and Peyton Meredith did the same thing as far as a pitcher, that role.
Definitely, sort of Anthony Rizzo-esque, if you will, getting up on the mound and throwing some strikes. Who was it that Rizzo struck out in that one time he got up to the plate?
He was was it Andrelton Simmons? No. It might have been Freddie Freeman.
I think it was Freddie Freeman. It was the Braves. It was definitely against the Braves. I think he struck out Freddie Freeman, which is insane to think about because, maybe there's hope for me to be able to strike out Freddie Freeman one of these days. Yeah. So I love that we're kind of talking about, like, transitioning to talking about, like, some of our favorite moments in baseball. What have been some of your favorite moments from this season up to this point?
My favorite moment was still being able to see that walk-off in the first game of that first doubleheader we were able to broadcast.
And, Brayden, you're definitely right. There's a chance we don't see extra innings. Here's the hit by Higgins, as that one is hit far out at the wall. That's going to be a walk-off home run by Ben Higgins.
How about that? It's raining tacos, folks.
And it is raining
tacos. Win it.
What a play by Ben Higgins. We were talking about it earlier in the broadcast, how Higgins is one of those power hitters for the Belters that you have in the middle of your lineup.
I mean, to be able to go and leave the broadcast booth and just take a break for a minute and going out in the concourse, I mean, there was energy out of the fans. They were all really excited to see that moment. And it had been, not very energetic a crowd to that point, but when you have a moment like that and you can show that the fans were already having fun, because it's hard to not have a good time at the Corn Crib, but to be able to go out there and have a walk-off home run like that, there's just energy, there's a lot of excitement, fans just love to be able to see that, and it was a fun moment for me for sure to see that the Corn Crib was able to produce a moment like that.
I hate that you cited that as your favorite moment because that was the one I was going to say for my favorite moment. But you're totally right. The energy there was awesome, and it was so cool getting to see all the Corn Crib, jumping around, hopping around. Especially considering up to that point, I believe it was the Belters had only scored one run in 6 innings up to that point. They scored 3 in the final inning alone to get them that walk-off victory against the Bees.
Yeah. It was a huge moment for sure, and since we're stuck with the same moment, I guess I'll go to another moment, which would be...
I got more moments.
Jake Armstrong being able to pitch. Both times that I've been able to see him pitch, just becoming my favorite player for the fact that he's just been dominant when we've seen him on the mound. He wears the same number that I wore in high school, too, so I was already biased toward him, and now I really like being able to watch him go up because it's just fun to be able to have a junior in college like that you can see go up on the mound and you trust that he's going to give you his best work every time.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe he is a Bloomington native, actually. Went to high school here in Bloomington and was from Bloomington here. So, maybe he's lurking around here. Maybe we can get him on the podcast at Blown Oak Pizza Co. if he wants to come out.
Yeah.
But one of my other favorite moments literally just happened this past weekend against the Pistol Shrimp. It was the bottom, maybe, I think it was the top of the 5th, actually. And Kane Hedrick was out there playing left field. I haven't really gotten to see Kane Hedrick play in any position up to this point in the season. I think I've only called 1 or 2 games where I really saw him. And in those games, he really didn't get much action as he is out there in left field. But there was a hit deep towards the gap between center and left. And Hedrick was buried deep in the left corner. He was almost playing the foul line, if you will, as a couple of foul balls had literally been just like hit over in that direction. And so he is booking it out towards this gap between center and left because Jared Comia is in no position to be able to make the play in enough time. He's sort of lollygagging, if you will, because he's not going to be able to get there in time to the ball, and Hedrick has already called it. So Hedrick is sprinting out there full speed, and I'm getting ready to call this as a dropped ball, and runners are about to start advancing around the bases. Hedrick, with 2 outs, makes a diving catch, lays out, completely extends for it, and is able to snag the ball and immediately stands up and holds the ball high above his head.
With a clean count to start off. Here's the pitch by Wibben Myers. That one is going to be rocketed out towards left field. A diving catch is made by Kane Hedrick. He extended out completely for that one, but was able to alter his body just enough to get underneath the ball. And I can't believe it, personally. He looked like he was a good foot away from being under that one.
It would have been awesome if that would have ended the game. Unfortunately, they did lose 7-0, so it was to no avail. But that was the final out to end the inning, and that was just an incredible show of effort from Kane Hedrick, and definitely somebody who I really want to see get some more action in the coming weeks.
One final favorite moment of mine would be when it was late in a doubleheader, and we'd both been commentating, so our brains were kind of fried for the most part. But in between innings, Corny did a race, they lined up a bunch of kids in Corny. Mm-hmm. Corny won the race, and then he jumped over the fence and just continued to run. I don't understand why Corny decided to just continue running, but he just looked like Forrest Gump out there, and he just kept on going. And with the way that my brain was at that point, I just couldn't stop laughing. I had a lot of fun watching that. And typically Corny just loses a lot. I don't know if you've noticed, especially for KCL type games that we have. Corny loses a lot, so it was nice to see Corny win one and then just be able to run away.
Well, I mean, when Corny's going up against kids who are literally less than half his age, I would hope he would win regardless of how big and clunky the suit he is that it's wearing.
Is when you are Corny for a day, are you going up there with the mindset of, oh, I'm just gonna let the kids win because they want to be able to enjoy their time, and they might enjoy their time a little bit more if they win, or are you gonna go up there and just be competitive? And I'm not gonna lose to you no matter who you are.
Absolutely not. I would definitely, if they let me have the chance, I would dress up as Cornette. I don't exactly know the name of Corny's girlfriend, his missus.
Oh, I can't remember Corny.
I can't remember either, and I'm actually quite ashamed of it to be talking about it on the Corn Belters podcast. But we know Corny's name, which I think is more than. Brain, let's transition now to talking about the power rankings for the Western Conference. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about now because we have seen, I think it's a total of 3 weeks of action up to this point, so I feel like there's enough of a sample size to really talk about, what these teams are shaping up to be. So you want to start at the bottom and then work your way to the top, or do you want to do a little vice versa?
I'm gonna try my best and not be slighted towards the teams I've been able to see versus the teams I have not been able to see in the West, because to this point I've been able to see Clinton, or I don't think I have seen Clinton, but I've seen Quincy, Burlington, and actually that's it for the Western Conference. They've actually just played a lot of they played the Dams and Pistol Shrimp, things like that, but those are the only 2 teams I've been able to see. So I'm going to try not to be slighted against them or in favor of them, nor the Corn Belters, but it's safe to say the Corn Belters looks to be near the top anyway. I would say at the bottom I would go with O'Fallon. They've lost 3 in a row. They're looking really cold and have struggled quite a bit. They're in a hole early. That's not looking good. Behind them, I would put Springfield, And then probably tied, I would put the Cape Catfish and Quincy Gems.
That's crazy that you have the Burlington Bees actually ahead of them. I was worried that you.
Out.
Yeah, no.
Hear me out.
I completely agree with you. I agree with you 100%. They are a team that their record does not reflect actually how good they played.
Yeah.
If a Ben Higgins walk-off home run didn't send them out of that first game, I don't
They
know
might
if
have
they.
even won the second game,
That's
yeah.
what I'm thinking. That's the thing. It's one play could have changed the entirety of this season essentially for the Belters. The
Yeah.
Belters could be sitting at 6-6 right now, and the Bees could be leading the division at
They could.
8-4. So I'm happy that you're actually giving them some respect
Yeah.
because I don't feel that their record is a true reflection of how their season has gone up to this point.
No, that's what I was going to say, is that the Bees in the games that we saw against them looked much stronger. Like you said, one walk-off would have at least given them a split. But they looked really strong, and they had flashes, even in the game when they lost by quite a bit, of being a really well-put-together team. It's just that they couldn't put together an entire game's worth of good performance in order to get a win. And I think if they can continue to make adjustments, if they can continue to work at it, then they can be in a spot where later on in the season they'll have a much better record and be in much better shape because once they are able to make those adjustments and get more used to playing with each other, that team looks like a very complete team, and I think they will be able to make up that hole they put themselves in early. Quincy looked okay. I thought they were I don't really know what to make of Quincy yet. I feel like I
Me
still need
neither.
to see them a little bit more to be able to make up like an actual opinion of them. But I think the Bees looked certainly a lot more tough to face in flashes than the Quincy Gems did throughout the games that we saw against Quincy.
I will say Quincy has some excellent players. Matthew Batts, for example, he was a guy who had half of the team's runs in a 10-run game, which is something to brag about. You can't really say that when your team scored 2 and you said, "Oh, I have half the team's runs," when you had a solo home run.
Yeah.
He had 5 runs scored all on his own, which I think is definitely a nod to him and definitely give him some respect when he's up to bat.
But one player does not a team make. One player doing real well is great, but when you look at the Corn Belters, they have a complete offense, and the Gems just look like middle of the order was about all they could do as far as making any big threats. And the Bees certainly looked in much better shape than Quincy as far as having an offense to this point.
So sort of transitioning now to the top of the pile as we have gone through most of the teams. The Alton River Dragons started out their season 6-0. They've gone 2-4 in their last 6 now. So night and day in regards to what's really happened for them. And just by looking at the box score, it looks like their pitching has sort of fallen off a cliff. The last 2 games alone, they allowed 22 runs against the Dans and the Cape Catfish. So is that something that's really going to hurt them down the line if they aren't able to get this pitching back in order and get their season back on track?
No matter how good of a team you have, you're going to lose some games. You're going to have some rough stretches, even if you do have a really dominant team. But as you said, their pitching has fallen apart for this little bit of a stretch. And I talked about it earlier that the Corn Belters throughout the whole season have been the most consistent in their pitching staff. The Corn Belters have a better pitching staff than Alton right now, and I would say a better offense than the Gems right now. They've been able to, despite the fact they went off to quite as good of a start as Alton, they've been able to make up for that. And now Alton, needs to get back on track because they looked really strong. They looked very tough to beat through their first 6 games, but now they've proven to be beatable. And really, all of these teams in the West have proven to be beatable. So I would say Alton will get back on track. I think they've got a good offense as well, which will certainly make up for that. Clinton, haven't been able to see them yet, but they're 6-6, which they could definitely do better than. I think they are a much better team than a 500. But Clinton will get back on track. I think Alton River's going to put this slump behind them here sooner rather than later. And the Corn Belters look good, but again, baseball, you can lose any game. No game's a sure thing. So,
I like that we bring up Clinton one more time because they're a team that we've already seen 3 times up to this point, and the Belters.
All on the road, right?
Yes, we had our opener on the road. We went 1-1 against them, and then when they came to visit us, we barely eked out with a win with a final score of 4-3. So they're a team that also, I feel like, is not that far behind the Belters, and that's what really scares me is that, like, you know, on paper right now, in regards to records, you know, these teams, like, are you know, they're not that far apart right now, and they could very easily close this gap if the Belters start to slip as we get further into June and then head into July.
Yeah, that's what's fun about having a league as small as this, is when you have it on a smaller scale, everyone's going to have slumps, everyone's going to have big stretches, and it's all going to even out to a really competitive end of the season. We saw for the Great River Division last year, it was the most competitive division in the league, and there was some really great baseball being played by all of them. It's just a shame that not all of them could make the playoffs, but
Yeah.
This division again looks like any four of these teams you could make a case for being a playoff contender if they get hot at the right time. And I think that the Prairie Land division is one that I need to be able to, like I said, get to see some action for. I haven't been able to see it yet, but I know that the Alton River Dragons are going to be good, and the Great River Division as a whole has shown that they have a lot of talent with it.
So thank you so much for tuning in to our third episode now of Corn on the Call. We wish Megan could have been here this week. It's a shame she can't be, but we'll definitely have to have her back on next week.
Yeah, well, I think we will probably decide to keep her on.
I
don't think it's time to eliminate her. We'll get her once her 2003 Chrysler gets finally fixed. She's been complaining about that for so long, and it finally broke down on us.
Yeah, it's a shame.
But catch us next Tuesday. It's going to be our next episode, finally featuring Corn Belters coaching staff. We've been promising him for weeks. But just to keep you on your toes, we've been refusing to actually deliver to this point, but now we will next week. And you'll also make sure to come to the Corn Crib this weekend. We got some good games. We're going to get a Dino Stress Ball as a giveaway for Jurassic Park in the Park this Saturday as well. So there's some good promos coming up, and some good baseball as well.
I want to know what a Dino Stress Ball looks
I
like.
want to see.
I know we're gonna get
my hands on a Dino Stress Ball.
I know we're gonna get to see it before everyone else, so I'm gonna have to keep my mouth shut for a little while. But I want to know what exactly a Dino Stress Ball entails. Is it going to have some scales on it at the end? I have a cow stress ball.
You have a
Essentially,
cow
it's
stress
in
ball?
the actual shape of a cow. I got it at an ISU event, and I hope that it's something similar to that. And
That's awesome.
It's not just a normal roly ball.
And even if it is, if it looks cool, kids will love it, and that's what
Oh
you're
yeah,
going for.
no
so.
question.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, we have been your hosts, Blake Borgart and Braden Fogerson, coming to you from Blono Pizza Co. Blono Pizza Co. is graciously hosting our podcast this season, and thank you so much for the great hospitality and great food. I actually came an hour early before this podcast started, so if it sounded like I was out of breath at the beginning, I absolutely was. I was out there hitting some balls with a driver, playing the Go Fish game that they had and playing the drive game. I had a drive that went 250 yards, Braden. Never in my life have I hit a drive that's went 250 yards up to this point.
We saw you Snapchatted us before I got here. You've been Snapchatting us videos of you swinging. You look like you were having way too much fun. So it's definitely something to check out if you're looking for a fun time here in Bloomington Normals, being able to go swing some golf balls. I have not been able to use your driver because you're righty and I'm a lefty.
That's
I'm
true.
gonna get on that too because that looked like a lot of fun, what you were doing.
So with that being said, catch us next week on Corn on the Call.